Good late afternoon, University of Chicago. Can you guys hear me? All right. Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank University of Chicago Divinity School, CSRPC, the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture, Spiritual Life, Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, and CSGS, I love the acronyms of universities, Center for the Study of Gender and Sexuality, for hosting this heartwarming, uplifting topic of anti-Sharia movement behind the controversy on Halloween, an apt and appropriate day where we Americans spend millions of dollars to be terrified by boogeymen and manufactured threats. How utterly appropriate, because several individuals and organizations and think tanks and politicians have made money and are getting money on supporting and mainstreaming the manufactured threat of Sharia, and specifically talking about the Sharia conspiracy, the fear of quote-unquote creeping Sharia that will apparently supplant the US Constitution with Islamic law and replace the stars and stripes with a star and a crescent. But I say Sharia has already infiltrated and conquered America. The signs are everywhere. We have a Muslim president, still in the Oval Office, Barack Hussein Obama, who is so Muslim, he has yet to step inside a mosque 4 years into his presidency. He publicly says Jesus Christ is a savior, attends church, celebrates Easter, and openly consumes both alcohol and pork publicly. Very Muslim-y behavior indeed. So much so that 17% of registered voters, according to the latest study, think he is Muslim. And just last week, 18% of Americans think he's actually Jewish. So more Americans, I'm not making this up, more Americans think Barack Hussein Obama is Jewish than he is Muslim. Jews and Muslims finally can unite on something. We will now see more Abrahamic laws, bearded men, and intrusive mother laws in America. We also have made strong progress in the culture war. Sharia has infiltrated the Miss USA pageant. 2 years ago, Miss USA was Miss Rima Fakhi, an Arab Muslim American from Dearborn, Michigan. Sharia has crept into our supermarkets, with hummus and tahini being sold in every Safeway, and Whole Foods, a great Sharia ally. Thank you. And we also have keffiyehs worn as fashion statements by hipsters. Once you win over the hipsters, you win over America. We have also infiltrated, vis-a-vis Sharia, the most influential voice in America, the television. We had our own reality TV show, All American Muslim, last year on TLC. And this year we have achieved the criterion, the pinnacle of sophisticated intelligent television, the Shahs of Sunset. We are officially as American Pie as, we're officially as American as American Pie and Snooki. But the creme de la creme was our infiltration of the international boy band sensation known as One Direction, featuring Zayn Malik, a Muslim, as one of its 5 members. This is proof, and I'm going to quote, this is proof of the, quote, boy band jihad, mega pop star pimping Islam on your daughters, end quote. According to Islamophobic blogger Debbie Schlussel, again, she's from Dearborn, Michigan. So obviously what I just said is ridiculous, and we should laugh either at me or with me. However, each one of these benign examples that I just gave has been used by members of the Islamophobia network that we'll be talking about in about 5 minutes as proof that quote-unquote Sharia has infiltrated America. That's the reality we're living in right now. The manufactured fictitious Sharia threat is about as threatening as the unicorn or Bigfoot threat. However, as we will learn over the next hour, nearly 24 states have introduced a particularly toxic bill, which started off as the anti-Sharia bill, and several states are seriously considering it. In 2010, let's take this back and talk about the genesis. Oklahoma voters overwhelmingly passed State Question 755, which was a ballot measure barring, quote, state courts from considering international or Islamic law when deciding cases, end quote. 70% of Oklahoma voters voted for it. Despite a zeal to root out a non-existent threat, the federal judge blocked the law for violating the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment and blatantly targeting the Muslim community. In January 2012, a federal appeals court actually upheld that ruling and blocked the implementation of the Oklahoma law, which would bar judges from considering international or Islamic law in their decisions. Specifically, the appellate court pointed out that proponents of the law admitted to not knowing of a single instance in which an Oklahoma court applied Sharia law or the legal precepts of other countries. Elected officials who supported the anti-Sharia bill also admitted they could not find any evidence of Sharia creeping into the state. However, again, fast forward to today, and we have nearly 24 states that have pursued or are pursuing anti-Sharia legislation, and furthermore, nearly every single major Republican presidential candidate, sorry Republicans, just the fact, have used the anti-Sharia threat as a meme to garner votes and money. Herman Cain, Tim Pawlenty, Rick Santorum, Michelle Bachmann are the main ones, and Newt Gingrich. Cannot forget Newt Gingrich. Mitt Romney, thankfully, has been more benign on this issue. Loud but tiny segments of our country have cited a smoking gun as proof of the Sharia infiltration. They always refer back to a 2009 New Jersey family court judge's decision to not grant a restraining order to a woman who was sexually abused by her Moroccan husband and forced repeatedly to have sex with him. There was a defense that he was just following cultural traditions and cultural practices. However, about 2 months after that erroneous decision by the federal court judge, the appellate court overruled him. Okay, so that's good. Constitutional scholars agree that if a religious practice conflicts with American law, the courts will strike it down. The New Jersey appellate court's quick response in the case of marital abuse supports that principle. So that's good, right? Everyone should breathe, relax, exhale, life is good. And yet, this anti-Sharia threat, a once fringe extremist meme, is now mainstream talking point for Republican presidential candidates. So before I talk about the Islamophobia industry real quick, how am I doing on time? I'm okay, all right. I'm going to just quickly explain what is this mythical Sharia, this big, scary, frightening Bigfoot that we have to protect ourselves against. All right, what is Sharia? Zahra talked about it briefly. I'll just expand on it just a bit. Sharia stands for Islamic or sacred law. It's an Arabic word, which translate to specifically the way or the path to water. It's very poetic, and it makes sense because for centuries, Muslim scholars have given a very broad definition of Sharia, reflecting the diversity of interpretations on how Muslims have attempted to best understand and practice their faith. Sharia represents, in essence, how practicing Muslims can best lead their lives in accordance to God's divine guidance. Okay, it may be generally defined as Islamic law, as revealed by God to the Prophet Muhammad, and interpreted by Muslim scholars over the past 1,400 years. Among the primary aims of Sharia are the achievement of justice, fairness, and peace. Now, there are usually 5 major goals of Sharia. Okay, there are the following: the protection of sound religious practice, life, sanity, and personal and communal wealth. The acknowledgement of sound local customs throughout the world is also one of the basic maxims of the Sharia, according to most Muslim scholars and Islamic schools of law. Sharia, then, is overwhelmingly concerned with personal religious observance, such as prayer and fasting. Just as many observant Jews follow the halakha, many observant Muslims also follow some or many aspects of Sharia. Currently, there are 35 countries that incorporate Sharia into their civil, common, or customary law. Now, the diverse manner in which all these different countries apply Sharia to their daily life highlights how Sharia is not static nor rigid, but instead a reflection of how different communities interpret it. This becomes important as we will move on. Now, what are the sources of Sharia? You guys still with me? Too many Arabic words? Okay, good. All right, good. What are the sources of Sharia, real quick? So people say, okay, Sharia, the divine way we want to live our life according to the divine guidance of Allah. Okay, give me the sources of Sharia. This is what the acknowledged 4 sources of Sharia are. First and foremost, according to consensus, Muslims look to the Quran, which is the Islamic holy book, if you will, the sacred scripture that Muslims believe God revealed onto their prophet, Prophet Muhammad. So first is Quran. Second is the Sunnah, or the prophetic etiquette, the prophetic model of behavior of the Prophet Muhammad. Third is the consensus of religious scholars over the past 1400 years. And fourth is the legal principle of analogy, where you draw analogies from these texts and try to apply it to your daily life, such as we're living here in the 21st century. And finally, and this is important, the fifth one, which is usually acknowledged, is good regional and local customs of where you are living, okay, which are also accepted as a source of Sharia. And this is interesting because Sharia mandates that Muslims follow the good and generally wholesome customs of the lands in which they live. All right, so much for that nonsense about Islamic law not being compatible with US values and so forth. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that in the next two talks. Furthermore, you already talked about fiqh, right? But real quick, the revealed and other sources of the Sharia require interpretation for the creation of substantive law. And this is where we get into fiqh. The process of legal interpretation is called, quote unquote, fiqh, which means understanding. All right, it means understanding. It requires trained religious scholars and is similar to the roles of other religious scholars, such as the details worked out in rabbinical law of Judaism. Is Sharia open to interpretation? Yes. Sharia is not static, it's not rigid, and certain interpretations and applications of Sharia change over time and continue to change over time. There is no one interpretation of Sharia. There is no book called Sharia. You can't check it out of the library. It's not like the Ten Commandments. No official document encapsulates Sharia. And this is important because, again, it is subject to human interpretation over the past 1400 years. As such, Sharia has always been alterable, pluralistic, prone to error, and dependent on human understanding, interpretation, and application for conditions and times specific to that community of believers. Is Sharia compatible with American law and values? They're going to go into detail with this. The answer is yes. Many aspects of Islamic law are consistent with modern rules. For example, both legal systems, Sharia and American law, allow rights to personal property, mutual consent of contracts, the presumption of innocence in criminal proceedings, and the right of women to initiate divorce proceedings. Again, the acceptance of sound national and local customs and conventions is part of the Sharia. When religious law conflicts with US law, we have this beautiful thing called the Constitution, which is awesome. And in the Constitution, we have the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment and the Supremacy Clause of the US Constitution, which prohibits American courts from substituting religious law for civil law or following religious law that violates civil law. This prohibition applies to all religions equally. So far good news, right? We should not be afraid. This is tasty stuff. The American legal system is working. All good. And I just want to quickly go, do American Muslims follow Sharia? Many American Muslims, like other religious communities who rely on scriptures and religious principles to guide their life, look upon Sharia primarily as a personal system of morality and identity. And Julie, I know, is going to talk about this in more detail. American Muslims, according to the studies, thanks to Julie in particular, see no conflict between their religious obligations and values and the US legal system. And finally, the whopper, do American Muslims want to replace the US Constitution with Sharia? And the answer, no.